Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm always delighted to have Dr. Angela Cartlasa here talking about polymathy. And today her special guest is Terry Babers. So over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Shrikant, and hi everybody. Good to see you all. And if you're watching this on the replay later, thanks for tuning in. As Shrikant said, my name is Dr. Angela Cartlasa. Just a little bit about me in case you're not familiar with my work. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on modern day polymaths, on the lived experiences of modern day polymaths. And there it is, Terry. Terry, do you want to? Yeah, Terry was showing it on the screen. So thank you. It is available on Amazon.com for anyone who would like a hard copy. Okay, so what are polymaths? Polymaths are not narrow specialists. They're people who may have multiple different careers over the course of their lifetime, who have lots of different interests. They're really just learners. They love to learn and explore and expand. And even though we live in this age of specialization where we're told to do something different if we want to be successful, we're told to pick one thing and stick with it. And if you have hobbies or whatever, who cares? But you know, we're told to get in the box and stay there. So polymaths are people who choose not to do that, who choose to live life differently on their own terms, kind of in a rebellious way. All right. I also want to provide the best scholarly definition of polymathy as well, real quick. And this is by Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein, who I consider Bob the forefather of polymathy studies. And polymathy studies, by the way, is a very small field. Not many thinkers or writers in that field, unfortunately. But we do have Terry, and we'll be getting to know her perspective today. All right, polymathy is active engagement in multiple interests or endeavors, integrating vocations with avocations simultaneously or serially across the lifespan. I'll read it again real quick. Active engagement in multiple interests or endeavors, integrating vocations with avocations simultaneously or serially across the lifespan. So that is Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein's definition. I just want to point that out as a basic foundation before we dive in. I also want to point out that in my view, this exists on a spectrum. It's not like you have to be Leonardo da Vinci to call yourself a polymathic person. You know, there are degrees, and even at any given time in your life, you know, depending on where you're at, you may be more polymathic or less polymathic at that particular moment. So I just want to point that out, that it's not black and white, it's more of a gray spectrum for most people. All right. Terry and I met because I want to let you know how I know her and why she's here. So I have a Facebook group that I started called Polymath's Place. And the reason I started that group, by the way, is because in interviewing modern day polymaths, I realized it's kind of a difficult road in this age of specialization to chart your own path. And also polymathy is not really talked about. We don't really use that word. So even finding a sense of community can be really difficult. People felt like they didn't really have a place, or that it was even sort of taboo to even talk about it, because am I boasting? Are people going to think I'm lying to even acknowledge and talk about one's own polymathy? So I felt bad for the polymaths I interviewed. And as someone who considers herself polymathic in nature as well, I thought, well, why don't we have a place? Let's make a place. I'll make a place. I call it Polymath's Place, in fact. And it is on Facebook and YouTube. And you are welcome to join if you would like. But since I started my group, it just, you know, linkages were made and people would join who were part of Terry's group. And Terry's group, actually, Terry, I may hand it over to you at this point if you want to. We're going to talk about Terry's group. In fact, one of the first questions we're going to dive into will be about her group. But that's how I know Terry, because she has a similar kind of group in Facebook as I do. Terry, could you take a couple minutes and tell us who you are? Tell us about your background. What makes you you?
Oh, what makes me me? I have a unique brilliance. And that is that I'm a jack of all trades, master of many. And which kind of defies the way that phrase is usually put out there. It's usually a disparaging term. And as I said earlier, I grew up going to 14 different schools and traveled a lot before and after high school. And even though my parents taught me that change is good and that I can do anything I want, I still felt the pressure to pick just one. And ultimately, in my careers in career program at high school, I had to pick a college, and to pick a college, you had to pick a specialty. So I chose dental hygiene. I went to dental hygiene school. And the reason I did, because I had that college and careers handbook, which was like this thick, because we didn't have the internet back in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And I had to go through that and pick something. And you know what? I could do everything in that book except maybe, you know, carpentry, because I don't like pounding nails, but I could do all of those things. And I picked dental hygiene because guess what? I thought there was no math. Wrong. And because my boyfriend was in dental school. And I went and I graduated school and I made a lot of money because it paid a lot of money. And that was like golden handcuffs that kept me trapped as a dental hygienist, scraping teeth and sucking spit for 20 years. I mean, I got to move around a lot with that job because anywhere I went, I had a job. But it was horrible because trapped is exactly how I felt. And fortunately, I got a disability and I had to stop doing it. So I went back to university, and dental hygiene is only a 2-year degree, but back in the 90s, I was making $50 an hour. It paid really well for a 2-year degree. And when I got this disability, I would have to just go back to plain sucking spit, forget the, you know, the scraping teeth, and you don't get paid a whole lot for being a dental assistant. So I went back to school and got a bachelor's in human communication. And I chose human communication, Shrikant, because of exactly what you said. I want to have to do with humans. And as I was trying to think, what can I pick? What can I pick? Because I have to pick just one. I thought, if I pick communication, I have the world open to me. I haven't really picked one if I pick human communication. I ended up getting both a bachelor's and a master's in that. And at the end of that program, I discovered coaching, and that was back in 2000, and entered this program of study for coaching. And I still thought I had to pick just one. So I picked career coaching. And I quickly realized, and this may be too much information, stop me, you know, go like this if it's too much information. I picked career coaching, and then I realized nothing happens in a person's career that isn't impacted by their life, the rest of their life. And nothing happens in their life that isn't impacted by their career, whether it's a long-term career in the government or starting their own business or whatever, or academia, it all blends together. So then I went back to school because love of learning is one of my character strengths, and I learned more. Now, I loved school. Because I could learn and learn and learn. And, but still I was torn because they kept telling me I had to niche down. I had to pick just one. Frustrating, very frustrating, pulling my hair out just the way I was when I was 18 in that college and careers class, and I had to pick just one out of that big old book. I've since learned that niching is a perfect metaphor. This directive to niche, it's a metaphor for how polymaths and multi-passionistas think and feel. We don't want to pick just one, and yet the world tells us we have to if we want to make any money and if we want to make an impact on the world. And then I was beginning to feel like a failure. I met in the same year these two women, Barbara Scher and Margaret Lobenstein, published in 2006. The same year they published these books. One talks about scanners, and she's talking about lateral thinkers, people who scan the horizon and they move side to side laterally with their ideas, and one idea leads to another. Renaissance Soul her subtitle is Life Design for People with Too Many Passions to Pick Just One. That rang true, and suddenly I didn't feel ashamed anymore. Suddenly I didn't feel guilty. suddenly I felt inspired to be who I am. Instead of trying to be this Mozart kind of person, I realized that I can be a Leonardo, I can be on the other end of that spectrum. And one of the questions you said you want me to talk about has to do with what can polymaths do to make a real impact on the world? And I think one of the things we can do is become fully aware of the power we have as polymaths, and to drop the shame and the guilt that we experience for being jack of all trades, for being flighty and fickle, and for bouncing around from idea to idea and passion to passion. It's horrible. And like you said, there's nobody, people didn't talk about that. If you talk about all these different things, then you're flighty and fickle and irresponsible. And it's bad. Well, anyway, I met these two women. I was coaching already for 3 years when I met Margaret Lobenstein, and I hired her to be my first coach. And then I attended her coach training program so I could learn how to coach other Renaissance souls. So I chose, in my own mind, I knew Polymathy, I knew Renaissance soul, I knew scanner, but when I would try to tell somebody, like I was teaching public speaking at university, and I could see all kinds of polymaths and multi-passionistas there in my classroom who felt the same kind of shame and guilt that I had. And I wanted to reassure them that, hey, this is a cool thing. This is how you're wired. You're created to be this way so you can do what you're created to really do in the world. But when I would use terms like polymath or Renaissance soul, they'd go, huh? And finally, I started saying multiple passions, multi-passionistas, and it was like light bulbs started going off. They recognized the term, and they didn't have this not good enough. A lot of young people in particular have this feeling of not being good enough to call themselves a polymath. Mm-hmm. And honestly, Angela, having watched some of the interviews you've done, I'm thinking, am I really enough of a polymath? Do I really have enough to be talking to these people? I mean, I still have that. I mean, we all still have it. Have that not good enough syndrome, NGES, niggas. I don't know how else to say it. But so my answer to that question about what can we do to change the world, what we can do is become fully aware of who we are and the power we have to make an impact on the world.
All right. Thank you, Terry. Can you guys sense her enthusiasm? She loves this stuff. So it's so great to have you here, Terry. So you mentioned your Facebook group. I mentioned your Facebook group, and you mentioned this word multi-passionista that you use. So the name of your group is Multi-Passionista Profit and Impact Tribe. I'm curious, like, what motivated you to start that group, to really like formally, create it and dedicate yourself in that direction?
It took a while to get there. I first coined the word in about 2008, and I had coaches telling me I should focus on that group of people, but I'm not good enough to do that. so I didn't. But eventually, exactly what you said as your reason to start Polymath Place is why I decided to start this group, because people need to be around like-minded people. And that doesn't mean we have to agree on our politics or our religion or our dietary habits. It doesn't mean, that's not what that means. That means that we understand one another's thinking process, that we understand and respect who each of us is at the core. And growing up in a world that is infused with Mozartism, with that hyper specialization, it's like we tiptoe around our multiple passions and our multiple areas of expertise. I mean, I know lawyers who are ashamed that they left their medical practice to become lawyers. And they're even more ashamed that they're now running a restaurant, you know, 3 different areas. And they're embarrassed by that because people don't understand. And their mom says, would you just settle down already? You're never going to be happy if you don't pick one. Or their spouse and children say, oh, you know, you're so successful. You're doing such an important thing as an environmental engineer. For example, I had a client who's an environmental engineer and had been for years. And she was doing wonderful things. And she was a really awesome leader for in her entire organization, which is an international organization, and specifically for this location here in Fairbanks. And she's doing such wonderful things. She made great pay. She had friends in the office. She had colleagues in the community. And she was just done with it. And her family said, no, you stay with it, stick with it. Why would you want to quit? And she can't explain to them why she wants to leave, because they don't understand this concept, this Leonardo style of lateral thinking and desire, this curiosity that they have, that they want, and they want to follow that curiosity. We want and learn in depth on many things. So anyway, I wanted people like her, interestingly, she's not on Facebook, so she's not in that group, to have a place where they can share their multiple areas of interests. And they can share the challenges, and they can collaborate on solutions for the world. So I think I, like Sirkant said, I was born to talk, and maybe I'm letting it get away from me here. Please interrupt if you want me to move on or.
No, that was great. Thank you, Terry. So you're a coach for polymaths, and I'm sure over the years you've seen the same types of struggles and challenges that polymathic people tend to experience. I'm wondering if you have any opinion on what could be the biggest game changer for polymathic types. Like if they could just figure out or get good at fill in the blank, then they could really leverage their talent to the fullest, even in this age of specialization.
Well, it goes back to what I've been saying. If they could just get really good at knowing themselves at the core, knowing their own strengths of character, their own talents, which, by the way, talents are very different from strengths. A talent is like an opera singer. She has this beautiful voice and stage presence, and she's traveling the world, changing the world with her beautiful voice. And then guess what? She gets throat cancer and she can't sing anymore. So now what? Is she doomed? No, she has strengths of character that allowed her to develop this talent. And her strengths of character may have included courage and persistence, may have, do you see what I mean by the difference?
Yeah, I love that.
A strength is what you have, what you from your core. And in the work I do with my clients, I use the VIA survey of character strengths, which is an empirically validated assessment. It's not an Oprah quiz. It's out of the University of Pennsylvania, and it's peer reviewed, and it's fabulously looks at what's right with humanity. And that was the goal of the scientists who first began to explore character strengths. They're positive psychologists. And what they wanted to do is kind of what I try to do with my clients, is figure out what are all the symptoms of what's right in your life, rather than a medical definition, the symptoms of what's wrong. This is what's wrong with you. Now we have a diagnosis and a treatment plan. Instead, let's look at all the symptoms of what's right with your life when you're at your best, and help you develop those. So Michael Jordan is a great basketball player, and I don't know much about basketball, but he shoots baskets, right? He's good at that. He knows what he's doing. Guess what he practices all the time to develop? Shooting baskets. He works to develop that talent he has, and he uses his character strengths to build on that talent. And the VIA survey of character strengths is a fabulous way that polymaths can identify their top character strengths and their middle strengths and their lesser strengths, and utilize those prioritize their focal points. They can figure out where their greatest energy comes from. So I may be interested in 4 different things right now, but if I sit back and think about it, which one energizes me the most? And it's probably somehow connected with some strength of character I have that makes me want to pursue it. So that's the one I'm going to pursue. And that's what makes it, that's where we can make the biggest difference in the world, I think, is by knowing who we are when we're at our best and then putting it to good use.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What would you say the greatest superpowers of polymaths or multi-passionistas, as you call them, are?
Off the top of my head, right away, I say curiosity and love of learning. I think those are the top 2. And those are our character strengths, by the way, that I would love to do some research on that to find out polymathic thinkers and their character strengths, to find out if my hypothesis is true or not. Because I believe that those are 2 of our greatest character strengths. Another one I believe is zest, enthusiasm. Now, I obviously have zest. I have arm flapping, flaming zest, but there are introverts who have zest as well. And that's the enthusiasm and the energy they have for doing what they are meant to do. And that's enjoying what they're doing. So I believe that curiosity, love of learning are their top superpowers. And this idea of, I call it dot connecting. Some people call it analogic thinking, lateral thinking. Analogic thinking is connecting dots, actually. It's connecting the dots from her environmental engineering field to the dots from her skills as a concert pianist, this woman I was talking about earlier, and doing something where the dots connect, and being able to think in terms of metaphor and analogy, imagery, to explain how something that seems totally unrelated. So there may be a problem that has been presented to the world or to a group of people or a team, and this person has experience that seems totally unrelated, but yet she has this analogic thinking, this lateral thinking skill, and this ability to combine both convergent and divergent thinking. So left brain combined, linear sequential thinking combined to put her right brain creative processes into play. So curiosity, love of learning, analogic thinking, lateral thinking. One of the books that I recommend is this one by Michael Gelb. Have any of you seen this? How to Think Like Leonardo. You've seen this? 7 Steps to Genius Every Day. And he talks about 7 Da Vincian principles in this. Have you read this book, Angela?
I have not read that one. Tell us about it.
Well, the very first, it goes into a lot of detail, and then there's a chapter on each of the 7 principles. And I don't speak Italian, so somebody's got to correct me on how to say these things. The first of the 7 Da Vincian principles is curiosità. Is that right? Curiosity. That's the insatiably curious approach to life, an unrelenting quest for continuous learning. That's a superpower that we have as multi-passionistas. The next one, this was even harder to say, demonstrazione. And that's a commitment to test knowledge through experience and a willingness to learn from mistakes. So not just the ability to learn from mistakes, but the willingness to dive in and make mistakes so that we can learn. And the next one is sensazione, and that's continual refinement of our senses. So that's our visual, our auditory, our smell, our sight, and how all of our senses combine to enliven and build up experience. The next one is sfumata. That means going up in smoke in Latin. But what it is the willingness to embrace ambiguity. The willingness, and you're talking 2 weeks from now about the paradox of polymathy, the willingness to pursue paradox, to not just experience paradox, but to pursue it and to look for paradox, because it's in our paradoxes that we find a pliable way to approach our passions. Am I making sense with that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's art de scientia, and I think that's arts and science is what that means. And that's developing a balance between science and art, between logic and imagination. That's the whole brain thinking that I was talking about, where we, obviously as polymaths, we are very right brain. However, we can intentionally draw in our left brain, linear sequential self, to make order out of our creativity so that other people can understand it. That makes, and then there's corporalatia, I don't know, cultivation of grace and fitness. And so that's our body, because Leonardo da Vinci was totally into, if your body is cared for, then everything else can work. Everything else can work if your body is cared for. And then the last one is concession. That's recognizing and appreciating the interconnectedness. It's systems thinking. So this is all stuff. And in this book, Michael Gelb, this is an amazing leadership book. And Michael Gelb talks about leading yourself using these principles. And he doesn't focus on polymaths. He focuses on the corporate world and helping people who are in leadership roles make the most of who they are at their core using these 7 principles. I believe this is what polymaths can really dive into. And I don't teach this enough, and I'm going to start teaching it more in my group. We'll have a book club, I think, soon.
So the book is called How to Think Like Leonardo by Michael Gelb. Sounds
How to
really
Think
good
Like
one.
Leonardo da Vinci by Michael J. Gelb, Gelb.
Awesome.
And with your role you're in the federal government, is that your leadership?
My primary job is in leadership training and development in the federal space. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you'll find a lot of reference to his work there. He's an amazing corporate trainer, and you will. And the thing is, if you reach out to connect with him, he'll connect back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds really like a cool guy. Can't wait
Yes.
to check out his book. Back to superpowers. Can I add a few too?
Absolutely.
So in my studies of modern day polymaths, I think another really cool facet of their personhood is that because they have this broad base of exposure, they have a large toolkit. When they meet someone, it's like they can find common ground. They can find they can find a way to connect that not everybody can do, right? So I think that's kind of a cool superpower, if you will, being able to find connection. I would say too, flexibility, because they like that change, they like newness, they are pretty good at switching. That just flexibility is that there's a movie, God, what is the movie? My 4-year-old daughter watches this animated movie, and there's a Elastigirl who her arms and legs like stretch and stuff. She's very flexible.
Elastigirl.
So yeah, Elastigirl.
So it's a pliability, the polymathic pliability.
Yeah, like a flexibility. You're not rigid and stuck, right? Because you like change, you like newness, you like variety, you like learning, you like switching. So there's a kind of a flexibility, which when the world's crazy, flexibility is extra useful, don't you think? You can adapt.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then I would say just one other thing is, because we live in this age of specialization where we're told to just get in the box, be a cog in a wheel, basically. But it's not really in human nature, in my view, to do that. It's just more efficient for the society. There's something really wonderful about just getting to experience and explore your authentic self. And that's kind of important, I would say, in life, is actually being who you are. So I would say another superpower is just authenticity. and what that allows for in terms of the richness of your life and the authentic connections you can build with other human beings.
I would agree with that. And you know what I think? I think a lot of the Mozarts are really Leonardos who are still in the closet.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Because it's more, I think human nature is more when we were children. When you were a child, most people, when they're a child, they have many pursuits and they go in one direction and it's like, okay, I'm going to go over here now. I may come back to that later, but I'm going to go over here now. And they dive in and they get fully in the zone when they're in that, but then they go to another. And I think that's more human nature than Mozart knew when he was 3 years old. He was going to climb the ladder up to the top of being a composer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did. And that's not, I don't think that's natural.
Right. Terry, do you think there are any sort of unexpected strengths that multi-passionistas or polymathic people have? Is there anything that you think people would be surprised by?
So unexpected by whom? You mean by people who are meeting someone?
Yeah, I mean, are there any strengths or traits even that tend to be associated with these types of people that, I don't know, someone meeting them might find surprising, or just someone learning about this group might find surprising?
A lot of things. And one of it is they may know about this person because of their reputation as a leadership coach or as an engineer. They may know about that person because of that. And then when they meet that person, they discover not only that, but they're also an amazing pianist, like I said, or they're a concert, they play guitar at a concert level, or that maybe they're a basketball player in the NBA, and it turns out that they're also run a program for youth in the inner city. People are surprised by that because they don't know that about this person until they have a chance to connect with them. So I think people are surprised at the diversity of interests that we have. And I think they're also surprised if they know that we have, if we, like me, in my community here in Fairbanks, I have kind of a reputation as being a gadabout and into everything. And, because I've done so many different things. And I think people are surprised my having dabbled in so many different things, which I don't really dabble. They're surprised that my interest in multiple areas really isn't dabbling, that I do go deep. Mm-hmm. I go deep enough to get what I need to do something with it.
Yeah, got it.
And it's, I think that's a surprise for some people, that somebody who has that many areas of expertise can also have depth of expertise.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good point, that like on the spectrum of polymathy, there is breadth, obviously, which is critical to being this way. You have to have breadth, but there's also depth. So in any given field or hobby or whatever, you may have more or less depth, but there has to be depth. If you are you have a lot of breadth, but it's all shallow, I would say that's more of a dabbler. That's not being a real polymathic type or multi-passionista even. So depth is important.
One of the things that I believe happens for us is that because of our curiosity and our love of learning, we do tend to dabble and a little bit. And when we're dabbling in these 2 or 3 areas right now, and we realize, maybe I wasn't as interested in that as I thought I was, and we walk away from it because we find something we do want to go deeper on. So there is a level of dabbling as experiment and as
absolutely
experience. So it's an opportunity to, what is it called? Sensation, continual refinement of our senses. So we're not going to refine our visual sense all at once. We want to do it a little bit at a time while we do our hearing and our my mind. What other senses are there? Smell, taste,
touch, hearing.
Touch. Yeah, all of those things. And that's just talking about the senses, but it's the same when it comes to the things we learn. Think about when, I don't know what your high school was like, but I went to 4 different high schools. And in all of those high schools, our weeks, our semester, our quarter consisted of weeks. And within those weeks, during that quarter, we had a total of 6 classes. And each week we had 4 classes. And we would do 2 in one day, and then 2 different ones in another day, and then an overlap in a third. So it would be 45 minutes here, travel to the next class, 45 minutes there, travel to the, so one might think that's dabbling because we're not going very deep all at once. However, over the course of the week and over the course of the semester, a polymath just can really experience a lot of knowledge and pursue their curiosity to six different classes in a week.
Yeah. David Epstein, in his book Range, he talked about a sampling period and how important it is to have a sampling period, because what happens for some people is they specialize so deeply, so narrowly, so fully, so quickly without having a sampling period that they end up investing perhaps years of their life into something they realize they're really not passionate about. And then they're kind of behind and pursuing what they actually would want. And that's a great book. I recommend Range by David Epstein.
Yeah, he talks about what he calls late specialization. And I think late specialization creates this pattern of polymathy. If the person is like you, a little bit rebellious, and they don't allow themselves to be forced into the box. They do study a variety of things, but then that's accompanied by all of this guilt and shame. And ultimately, they leave it all behind and start something new. He cites research that says the average baby boomer has had 11 very different jobs by the time they retire.
Interesting. Jennifer.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Jennifer in the chat said, when I was in middle school, my guidance counselor asked me what I would do if I could do any one thing for the rest of my life. And my reaction was, shoot me first.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so built in, even with little kids. It's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the assumption is you'll pick one thing, even as a child, like, oh, you should know that one thing. And the question is not phrased like, oh, what multiple things would you like to be when you grow up? Or what multiple things would you like to explore now? It's like, one thing and later.
So my dream is, Mozart leaned his ladder on the wall and climbed up and stayed there, and he made success, sort of. I think he ended up dying at a very young age, but still, one ladder, one wall. My dream is one of those rooms that ceiling to floor bookshelves, and there are like 6 walls in the room, so it's not a square, and it has a ladder that moves up and down, and it has scaffolding between, it has multiple ladders, and it has scaffolding between the ladders so that I can go from one place to another and grab all of this information and pull it together in ways that don't make sense to somebody else.
Right.
And careers can be the same way, or businesses. Entrepreneurs, I think entrepreneurs are frequently multi-passionistas.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know from my research as well that many polymaths who don't want to be put in a box, who don't want to be pigeonholed, who want to use all of their talents, when they're put in an organization who does try to fit them in that squish them really into a little box, they're unhappy because organizations don't really think strategically or even really have an awareness that just everybody, they hire and they employ people in the everybody should be a specialist mentality. So a polymath in that environment can sort of stick out like a sore thumb and not be happy. So many of them do jump ship and create their own opportunities as entrepreneurs.
So with your consulting with the federal government, your leadership, and so leadership, people tend to think that you've worked your way up through the ranks. In your consulting, do you help them understand the value of a polymath to their particular, to whether it's, DOT, DOJ, whatever? Do you help them with that management?
The truth is, Terry, this is not a good answer, but it's the truth. My work in the federal government, I keep separate from my polymathy stuff, and the federal government does not train or talk about polymathy at all. They're still in the specialist mentality, but I think it could be very useful. Hopefully someday I will be able to sort of figure out a way to merge those two worlds of mine better. But yeah, especially in the face of complex problems where we need creativity and innovation, polymath can really be
Uh-huh.
useful for that kind of thing. Next question, Terry, is just a real practical one. So obviously, polymaths can be polymathic, or multi-passionistas can be multi-passionista-ish by, juggling things at once. They may also just have seasons and do things sequentially as well, and that may be how they do it. So it shows up in different ways. But I find a common way that polymathic types tend to experience life is by juggling. They like the kind of stimulation of juggling, but that's also difficult. So what advice would you have for a polymathic person who wants to step into the power of their talent, of their polymathic talent? What advice would you have for someone who's so capable and intelligent and wants to explore all that they're curious about, but just prioritizing and managing time and all of that is very difficult?
It is really difficult. First of all, I want to recommend a book. I always like to recommend a book. And maybe that's a cop-out, but I teach from this book because it's so powerful. It's not an academic read. It's a very pragmatic way of experiencing life as a polymath, a multi-passionista, a Renaissance soul. This is Margaret Lobenstein, and she talks about creating, what does she call it? Time management magic for Renaissance souls. And she has a process where she teaches you how to develop focal points, 3 to 4 focal points for now. And everything is for now, because once you pick something, it doesn't mean it's forever. It's for now. So, and that's kind of, I think I'm going to get that URL. It's for now, or just for now, whatever. But in this book, chapter 10, she talks about identifying the focal points of passionately held interest or expertise that you want to deal with now. And she has a strategy. So it's kind of like she uses a metaphor of an ice cream shop, where you go into an ice cream shop that has 100 different flavors. You're not going to try all of them at once. No, they give you a flavor pack with 3 to 5 to choose from, and you choose from those 3, and then from those 3, you pick 1, maybe 2, and you take that home, and then you can come back and get more later. So with her focal point, she has a strategy for helping you identify their focal points for now, 3 to 5, and a way of redefining time so that you you identify the activities associated with each of your focal points, and you work them into your schedule in a very flexible, really pliable way. And most of the people that Margaret Lobenstein was addressing here already have jobs. They have jobs, okay? And they either have to, because they'll go crazy if they don't, or they want to be able to pursue their multiple passions and their focal points, even though they have a job and they have a family and they have, commitments. And she has a strategy to help you do that. And it's very simple. It requires doing a little bit of math, which I hate. But she talks about breaking down, thinking in terms of a week. And she says the total number of hours in a week is 168. How much sleep do you need? So we'll take the big chunks first. You need 56 hours, maybe. That's what you say. And that gives you 112 hours left. And say you have including commute, 50 hours a week for your job, okay? So that leaves you with 62. And that leaves you with actually 34 meaningful, she calls them M&M hours, meaningful and, what does she say? Manageable time. 28 hours left. That's 4 hours a day. Meaningful and manageable time to address your 3 to 4 focal points. And she breaks it down in such a way that whether that focal point is starting a new business or learning several new things for your job, or finishing your dissertation, or planting your perennial garden, or your, whatever you're choosing to do. And this is a strategy that it's just eye-opening. Whenever I teach this to people who think, oh, I never have time to do everything and I'm overwhelmed, but yet I have to do all of this or I'll go nuts. When they see these numbers, as much as I don't like math, when they see the math, it's like, oh, I guess I do have plenty of time. Got to stop the swirling. That's all. I call it treading quicksand. When you have these ideas in your head or these thoughts that things you have to do, you're treading quicksand. It gets you deeper and deeper and deeper in overwhelm. But this is chapter 10 of Margaret Lobenstein's book, The Renaissance Soul is Powerful.
Awesome. And thanks for all those.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, thanks for all the book recommendations. That was one of my questions, but we've already covered so many wonderful books, seminal books in this area. So thank you for that. Were you going to say something, Terry?
Just more about time management. If you do some Googling for different ways of managing time, you'll see where they talk about batching your time. And that's a singularly passionate way of naming these focal points, where you batch your tasks according to the time you have. Margaret's strategy of looking at focal points acknowledges that you do have these really diverse areas of expertise and interest, and that you're wired to pursue these passions. And if we don't, then you're just going to go back in the closet and you'll suffocate.
Terry, how do you think our world would change if polymathic people were more appreciated, more integrated, more leveraged?
Oh, I think a whole lot of the conflict in the world would dissipate. I really do. One of my areas of expertise is I'm a mediator for the state court system, or I was here in Alaska, and I've stopped doing that. But in the process of mediation, when you have a group of people who are in a controversy or a conflict, they all have a different perspective and they all have different areas of expertise. And if a few of them are polymathic, I find that the conversation opens up because they can make these connections. They have this lateral thinking. And so they can, one of the things that I think polymaths are really good at, and I didn't mention, is putting themselves into somebody else's shoes or behind someone else's glasses so that they have a different perspective, because they can imagine themselves in different roles. And so when they go into those different perspectives, I just think that they can cushion the conflict. If you have, that's one of the things that would change. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, another thing, one of the problems with a lot of corporate teams or governmental teams is that they're siloed. They're very much siloed into one, but by the very nature of specialization. And I think leadership in corporations has begun to realize that it's good to have cross-disciplinary teams, mm-hmm. right? So you have teams that where the doors of the silos open up a little bit and people interact and they go back and forth and exchange ideas that are more lateral thinking. Well, the thing that's brilliant about us as multi-passionistas and polymaths is that we're our own team, our own cross-disciplinary team, all in one person. Mm-hmm. And we have respect for someone else's, especially when we're in groups like the Polymath Place or the Multi-Passionista Profit and Impact Tribe. When we're in groups with other polymaths and multi-passionistas, then we're surrounding ourselves by people who have that lateral thinking, that skill of both convergent and divergent thinking. And so we can help, I think, whatever problems, whether it's has to do with land use or climate change or COVID or, God forbid, politics, we have solutions if we have enough faith in ourselves, if we have enough confidence in who we are at our core and enough belief in our own power as polymaths to speak out and to help other people make connections.
Terry, if our society doesn't morph out of this age of specialization to appreciate this, the more polymathic way of contributing, thinking, living, what do you think the cost will be?
Oh, Lord. You know what? I can't even imagine that that's not going to happen. I mean, I can't even imagine that it's beyond me to imagine that polymathic thinkers will continue to be disparaged. It's beyond my imagination to think that only singularly passionate, only specialists and hyper specialist people will receive will have the credibility to make changes. I think the world is changing enough that it's not going to go back. People like you who, and Michael, who's Michael
Araki.
Michael Araki, who has created an entire area of study. It's a new area of study, but you know, every area of study we have was once a new area of positive psychology was once a new area of study, and now it's spread around the world. That's that via survey of character strengths is, I think it's like 65 languages now, and millions upon millions of data points have come in from people taking that assessment. It was once new and nobody was talking about it. And it's making big changes in the world. Same thing with polymathic studies. And you've got a lot more to contribute than what you've done. I mean, you've done this, guys, if you haven't, so yeah, this is a good one. This is very pragmatic. This is an interesting combination, an exciting combination of academically presented and well-researched, and it's really readable. I mean, it doesn't read like a novel, but it comes close.
Wow, thank you, Terry.
You've done a really good job of you know, there are a lot of recovering academics in the world. and they want, and I think I'm kind of one, I want the things that I teach and the ways that I present things to be well-researched and documented and cited and everything, but I also want it to be relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the easiest, it's a balance. And I think you have made that balance, and you've absolutely got the whole, you may have a little bit more left brain because you just got out of, you haven't completely recovered from being an academic yet. but if anybody's interested, this book, well, you've got to be interested. It's good. And you can get it on Amazon now.
I want to say too, it's also available for free digitally if you Google In Pursuit of Polymath, or if you Google Angela Cotalessa, my name, you can read it for free digitally on ResearchGate. I put it on Amazon because I had people who wanted the hard copy.
Well, let me make a suggestion. I mean, it's good that you offer it for free, but having it on Amazon and having it searched on Amazon will raise polymathy in societal awareness. And that's an important aspect of making sure that we don't all get stuffed back in the closet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if it becomes, or when it becomes well read, the more it's read, the more it's purchased, the more stars you get and recommendations, the more Amazon will raise it in the feed, sort of an SEO kind of thing, I think. I don't know, are we computer people here? But that's an important, I think, writing books like this, or I think somebody just quoted, there are a lot of books out there now that talk about Renaissance souls. I should write a book. I would love to write a multi-passionista manifesto, but you know.
Do it. All right, I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to transition into Q&A. So I'm going to ask my last question, Terry, just a very personal question, because you're clearly a polymathic person, a multi-passionista yourself, even though it's also your audience and your you know, your target audience. But so when you reflect back on your own life, how do you think being a multi-passionista, living your life in a polymathic way, impacted your experience of being a human being?
I think that the strength you pointed out after I got finished rambling about what I think the strengths are, the strength you pointed out about relationships, about developing human connections, is that, and I know singularly passionate people can be gregarious and they can have good relationships and social skills, but I think being a polymath has made the difference because of my curiosity. I'm curious about other people. It's gotten me in trouble a lot of times too. You can overuse a strength. But I think that I mean, it was hard always being the new kid. I got to tell you, it's really hard being the new kid. You don't have the right clothes. You didn't listen to the right, you know, radio station and music, and you didn't study the right chapters last week because you're in a totally new program. That was hard. But being a polymath and being excited about learning new things and connecting and developing relationships is what I think made me able to make it through that with pride intact. And it also actually, believe this or not, it actually helped me survive being a dental hygienist. Because as a polymath, that piece you were talking about, relationship development, there's a very different way of doing it as a polymath. I had between 5 and 7 patients a day, every day, and I worked 6 days a week a lot of times. And my curiosity and my love of learning and that piece of relationship development really helped me maintain my sanity after 20 years of scraping teeth and sucking spit. I took profuse notes. I had my own record keeping system. I mean, of course, there were the records that went in the file charts, but I had a record keeping system for my patients of my own. And in that record keeping system, guess what I kept track of? When the baby was born, whether or not she was going to visit her mom in South Carolina, you know, what her new job was like. And I have those things available to me so that I could remind myself of who they are when our conversation starts again. And believe it or not, yes, it's true. People get, you know, when the dental hygienist asks you questions and you've got your mouth full of her hands. Believe me, she can understand a lot of what you say.
That is a skill. That is quite a skill.
It's a skill. Yeah. And so I think that it allowed me to maintain my sanity for those 20 years that I was a hygienist. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Terry. And thank you for such an interesting discussion with so many nuggets of wisdom and astute observations about what it's like to live this way and the powers of polymathy and multi-passionista types. All right. We're going to shift to Q&A now. Shrikant, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Terry. This is incredible, but this is not the end. This is the beginning, okay? Because now you put all these ideas in the bonnets of all these people, and now they're going to ask you questions, and then they're going to go and discuss them amongst themselves, and then they're going to come back and tell you what they are walking away with.
Awesome.
So is going to be Sadia, Trevor, Jennifer, Kevin, Barry, and Martin. Folks, at this time, just ask questions. You will have plenty of time to talk about your observations in the breakout rooms as well as the takeaway section. At this point, questions only, so we can get to as many questions as possible. Sadia, go ahead.
Hi, I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, my question was, how could I find out if I'm a polymath objectively? I would like to avoid self-diagnosing or declaring that. So I feel I may be, but I would like to know that are there any signs or traits for that?
So it's a good question. Right now, we don't really have a good tool like an assessment to measure how polymathic someone is or on a spectrum, or like a yes or no answer. It's mostly by self-identification, or other people sort of calling you that way. I also want to point out, some people don't feel comfortable saying, I am a polymath. It feels egotistical or too much, or I'm not accomplished enough, or they have the imposter syndrome. And so another way of saying it that I tend to say for myself is I just say I'm polymathic. I use it as an adjective rather than a noun. So that's another way you can do it. Traits, I mean, I think the key hallmark, and Terry, maybe you have something else. The key hallmarks of being a polymathic person are loving learning, being very curious, a voracious learner, you have a hungry mind, and it's not narrowly focused. It's across disciplines, and it's lifelong, and it's continuous. That is like, if you don't have that, you can't be a polymath. And also in terms of what you do, how you express it, how you accomplish it. So it's not just, and there may be people who disagree with this, but in my view, it's one thing to have a temperament and a capability and multiple potentials, but it's another thing to actually experience and express it, to have the multiple careers that you're expert in, to have the multiple types of hobbies that you go into deeply. To express and experience your polymathy is different than like having the potential for it someday.
Right.
So I would say learning, curiosity, breadth, and depth are the most critical elements of it. Terry, do you have anything to add?
Well, with Margaret Lobenstein's permission, she has a quiz to see if you're a Renaissance soul in this book that I've been touting. And with her permission, or with her, she's gone, but with the permission of her estate, I've taken that and added to it and put it online. And I'm going to ask you a couple of the questions. So there's like 14 questions here. And if you have, no, there's 20 questions. And if you, and I'm not going to ask you all of them, but if over half of them are yes, even if you can put them on a Likert type scale if you want, but even if half of them are yes, then you're probably a polymath or a Renaissance soul. So some of these, I love this one. Do you find yourself interrupting yourself, dropping one task to pick up another one before it's done? When you really understand how something works, or when you master a new activity, are you ready to try something new? When you were a child, did you have a whole lot of answers to the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I hated that question. Do coworkers and friends seek out your opinion on a huge variety of topics, even those outside of your field? Now, this is one that has really helped me to acknowledge. When you come up with an idea, do you prefer to delegate or hire out the task of turning that idea into a reality? Now, for me, I have this control freaky kind of thing where I have had to, I was 69 on Tuesday of this week. No, Monday was my birthday. And I have taken all this time to learn how to delegate and to learn the real value of it, because I get these ideas and I want to implement them, but because I've got so many other ideas, I don't have time to implement them. So they go by the wayside, either that, or I put them in my idea book. So I can come back.
I love that.
If I want to come back to it later. Okay, so are bookstores and libraries like a candy store to you? Places where wonderful and intriguing items are on display at every turn. Has a friend ever suggested that you become a contestant in a game show? Because you know a little bit about a lot of stuff. I think there's a song about that. I know a little bit, a lot, about, whatever. Are you skeptical, and have you had horrible experiences with traditional time management business tools, long-term, long-range plans, detailed schedules? This is one. Do family members offer this kind of advice? You ought to settle down and get known in one field rather than switching from career to career. And this is a problem of polymathy. We tend to distrust our own decision-making ability because we definitely knew we wanted to be X, and then definitely knew we wanted to be A, and then switched again and knew we wanted to be Z. when we were kids. And so that gave us this idea that we don't know how to make decisions. So Sadai, I answered your question long-winded, and I would suggest that you go get this book, or that I can send you a link to the, because I have it on automated online.
Jennifer has already posted the link online.
Oh,
We have some very, very sophisticated people here. So it's
the link to the book, the Amazon book?
No, both there is a link to the Amazon book in the chat, as well as the link to your PDF about the quiz.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next up is going to be Trevor, Jennifer, Kevin, Barry, Martin, and Mallory. Trevor.
I want to ask a question about an idea Terry touched on. It'll take me about 60 seconds to state this question.
Sure, I give you 60 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, we currently run the world on a specific set of political, economic, societal, etc. ideologies, systems, processes, etc. And we do so using specific, extremely suboptimal modes of communication. The fundamental abstract flaws in our current systems should be blatantly obvious to any polymath with some years of diverse experience and knowledge behind them. Above in the chat, we were talking about polymaths having many of the answers to these problems, but we only talk about these ideas and perhaps write books about them. Spreading the ideas, hoping they will take root, but kind of using faith to make this happen. The question is, why do we not do something about this? Why not, in addition to all the good things we do now, like these meetups, writing books, spreading the good word, why do we not also form an alliance of people like us, but also people in other special interest groups, right? Like the spiritualists, like the people with conflicting religions, people from the alt-right, the alt-left, do you know what I mean? Form an alliance that is, start a new system from the ground up that is completely outside the current system.
Thank you.
And do it properly this time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Trevor. Great question. Go ahead.
So somebody says Mensa. I don't know that I have that level of intelligence to be part of Mensa, but I do have lots of great ideas. And I know that there are others who also have it. I just read something about, and this may be old news to some of you, but a man who has Parkinson was complaining on TikTok or something about how he can't get his medicine out of his bottle. And guess what? When he gets his medicine out of his bottle, because guess what? He's got Parkinson's, so he can't open it, and then it spills and he can't pick it up. So this is a big problem for him to even be able to take his medicine. Some guy on TikTok saw this, and he has some engineering background. He has no background in and structural design, but he has no background in making 3D stuff. So he designed something for a new pill bottle, and then he put it out there asking if someone who has a skill at creating things with 3D printers could do it. Overnight, he had thousands of people responding to that sort of thing. So this is TikTok, which I think of as a little kid's dance, platform. But Trevor, I think that that's an awesome, awesome idea. And it does happen. It just doesn't happen with a lot of intentionality from the leaders in the polymathic field. And Angela.
I love your question and your point, Trevor, and it's something I'm actively working on right now to create a polymath think tank and an organization that would actively promote this and bring these people together to fully leverage their talent. It's in the very beginning stages. Check back in a year or two. Hopefully I'll have better progress.
Okay, next up
it won't take you a year.
Next up is Jennifer, Kevin, Barry, Martin, and Mallory. Jennifer.
So I've been incredibly chatty, and I apologize for that, but I'm having such a good time. Terry, I have 3 questions. I'm going to throw them at you. You choose one.
Oh, no, don't make me pick just one.
No, I can't.
Just make them quick. Just make them quick.
Okay. So how to fund multiple passions is the first one. The second one is choosing something that's energizing. You talked about choosing an energizing path. versus making money. I'm currently doing a making money path that's partially energizing, but it's not what I'm happiest about. And then finally is what to do when you get bored with a thing. I often find myself like going deep and then getting bored. So those are my three. Do you want me to repeat them?
No, I got them. Those are
Okay.
great questions. How to fund it? I really can't respond to that. There's so many options for how to fund your passionately held interests. So for example, I wanted a PhD, but I couldn't figure out a way to fund it. So I didn't do it, and, but I haven't, this may seem an exercise I run all my clients through, where they create 4 sheets of paper with a column with a lot. So there's 2 columns on each page, and one page is labeled people, one page is labeled activities, one is labeled environments, and the other is labeled habits. Habits are different from activities. And each page has 2 columns. One column is energizes me. The other column is drains me. This is essentially a bullet journaling exercise that can expand, but you go through and you think in terms of all the mundane and exciting things in your life, and think about whether or not they energize or drain you. And by the way, energizing and draining have completely different physiological responses. When you're feeling energized about something, you feel it in your body differently from when you're feeling drained. It doesn't have to be toxic to be draining. Doing something like, for me, picking teeth, that was draining after a couple of years. So I had to figure out a way that I could make connections with people so that I felt energized to be working with them. And I felt energized about getting up and going to work in the morning. So that's the energizes and drains. And I forgot the third question. That's just one. I mean, there's a lot of other strategies, but that's one.
Terry, let's go to the other people's questions. I want to make sure everybody gets to ask their questions. We'll come to all, we'll have one more bite at the apple. Jennifer will get one more bite at the apple when she does her takeaways. She can put the question back there, over there. Next up is going to be Kevin, Barry, Martin, and Mallory. And then we're going to do our breakout rooms. Kevin.
Thank you, Angela and Terry. It's great. I like your polymath energy. My opposite is true or not. In some degree of a polymath, we are born in polymath. The kids explore everything they could. In adult, we do things with background music. That's at least 2 or 3 things. The question is here: why polymath meet a challenge so much in current society? That's another my hypothesis. We have a silo culture. We break down our structure like from top to down, from government to the corporation, business to community, especially job. There's very basic, skills need, nothing else. Thank you.
It's an excellent observation. And I don't know the answer to why, except we are a siloed, specialized, hyper-specialized culture. And it's not just North America. It's all over the world. And Angela's question about what happens if we get stuck and we go backward so that there's less polymathy. And I think this conversation expanded, and Angela's plan right now to create a polymath think tank is brilliant to help make that shift and change.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Barry, Martin, and Mallory. Barry.
Yes, Terry, picking teeth is draining because everything you do goes down the drain.
Oh gosh, Barry, thank you for
that.
that.
Brilliant. That is brilliant. Thank you so much. I love it. You know what? That speaks to the polymathic tendency to think in metaphor. It goes down the drain, which is a perfect metaphor for the draining energy of scraping teeth. I'm sorry, go ahead with your next question.
Yeah, well,
Barry, at least I was expecting Barry to have constructed a poem on this already.
I do have a poem.
The poem. Go ahead.
I do have a poem here, which leads to my question. My question really is, if you're going to form a tank, as a system engineer, scientist, poet, yogi, composer of music, all these things.
That's you?
Yes. So I think if you're going to have a think tank, you need to think about two things. And I want to ask a question about, have you thought about this? And has anybody thought about this? Is developing a theory of polymathy. And you keep talking about a spectrum. Right away, when you think of a spectrum, I think of autism. I think of IQ. And when you have a spectrum, you need to have a method of measuring a spectrum. And so there needs to be, and what I'm doing as I study this myself for my own use, I'm finding it necessary to adopt different theories, and I'm trying to combine them, like the theory of positive disintegration I've talked about. That's one theory. But I want to leave you with one 3-stanza poem before I leave. The fruit, my fruit were the grapes of math that became the grapes of wrath. Because I'm an empath, I choose the vine to wine path who has the grapes of a polymath.
I want that in writing, please. I'll quote you. I love that.
And I also did a painting of this too. And it's 4 of me climbing up a hill to a winery. So I do think in metaphors, but it is. I want to just leave one thing is that has been my experience that monomathic activity make me angry. They not only drain me, they make me drink. That's what I mean by the grapes of wrath. That's
Barry, just a quick response. The measurement of polymathy, it is definitely on my radar. Michael Araki is working on an assessment of different types of polymaths. I think we need one for like how strongly or other typologies, you know, to measure it and figure out where someone lies on a spectrum. And a theory of polymathy, yes. I mean, there are so many things in my wish list in addition to like creating a think tank and doing more research, having an assessment, more scholarly work, and more work that is not necessarily in academia as well. I have so many things I want to do, and they're all, everything you said is on my radar. Check back in 10 years. Let's see where things are at.
If you need any help with ideas, be sure and contact me because I have a lot of ideas about this.
Awesome. Thank you, Barry.
Next up is going to be Martin from Argentina. Martin.
Hi, hi Terry.
Hi, Martin.
I want to ask, it's difficult to me to choose only one question, but and it's difficult to organize my mind in English. But what do you think that we should do in a world that goes straight to the technology and not connection, people with people and AI and all that thing? What do you think that we can do to reconnect people, to recommunicate each other, and to still being humans in a way that use technology and not technology use us? What do you think that we can do in that world that comes?
That's an important question. And I've learned that people have different ways of connecting. And one of them is with the written word. One of them is with the spoken word, and one is visually. And all 3 of those things can happen through technology. And we can truly connect with one another using those 3 senses, audio, visual, and the writing. I don't know what sense the writing is. I guess it's it's tactile. Things like Facebook and TikTok and LinkedIn and MeWe or whatever you want to look at. This meetup here is both visual and audio. We can learn to connect with one another. Now, you can't, emoticons are awesome because they help you sort of explain what you meant. Like, just kidding, when you post a smiley face after you say something kind of nasty. But learning to have respect for those 3 different forms of communication that happen through the technology that you're describing, Martin. Of course, there's face-to-face that includes all of those, including the nonverbal, all of those. I don't know if that answers your question. Angela probably has a little bit more lucid response.
Well, I want to be sensitive to time too. So why don't we, Martin, thank you. Terry, thank you. And Shrikant, we probably should go to the next one because I know we don't have a ton of time left.
So let's do one thing. Mallory, Laura, and Jean, I'll give you priority in the when we do the takeaways. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. The breakout rooms will last for about 18 minutes, after which, so you get to talk about all these ideas that Terry has presented and Angela has presented, and then we'll come back and we're going to be talking about what we are leaving with, starting the breakout rooms now. So folks, now it's time for takeaways. What we're going to do, if you would like to share your takeaways, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. I'm going to give priority to people who had put the exclamation mark first. And Terry, once everybody has spoken, both you, Angela, and I will get a chance to respond at the end. But we'll start with everybody's takeaways first. So it's going to be Mallory, Laura, and Jean first. Mallory.
Hi, I had a question that I wanted to ask first. I was wondering, what is the best way to have a business as a polymath? Because it's so difficult to maintain the idea over time. You get bored and you move on. I didn't know if there might be any tips or tricks or thoughts for that.
Excellent. Everybody is, welcome to put questions down, and we will deal with all of them together at the end. Next,
sorry.
Laura, followed by Jean, Barry, and Linda. Laura.
Why do you feel the need to have to name yourself or identify yourself, to say that you're a polymath? Isn't it just enough to be somebody who likes, has interest in many areas?
Okay.
Does it really matter?
That's a really good question, but we're going to address it later, right?
All the questions we are going to handle later. Right now, people are talking about what they got from the meetup and what questions remain. And then we will deal with all of them together at the end. I'm keeping track of all of them, and Angela and Terry, you're welcome to keep track of them. But if you would like, I'm keeping track of all of them. So I'm going to recount all the questions, all the takeaways, so that we can respond to all of them. Next up is going to be Jean. Jean, go ahead. Jean, are you there?
Okay, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, it's great meeting. I have similar question. Why have to label yourself? But every time I join the meeting, I understand more because it's really helped me to see so many commonality between the people talking and me. For example, the idea book, I have so many ideas every day and I cannot have time to do all of them. So I actually discussed with our group. I said, I realized we have so many ideas. In order to make them happen, we have to have leadership skill first. Another one, we have to work with people who are more specialized because then they can focus on one thing to get it done. So when I first working, I realized as a polymath, there's a lot of disadvantage because I'm a big picture person. Then I try to be the boss more like, and the boss wants you to do one thing. They don't want to, and the people in the middle usually are very detail-oriented, executive type of people. So I think as a polymath, it's harder when you're younger. As you move up, you actually have more chance. So it's very important to maintain your polymath. At the same time, you have developed certain things like an architect. At least I have that skill that stay with me. I can kind of specialize in that way. So I think that's another very important thing. I think as part of polymath, we have to foster our leadership skill or entrepreneur spirit. If you want to stay in corporate, you have to have leadership skill, which is not easy, but you have to learn that. As entrepreneur, then I have my own business. I'm doing very well. And I want to send my new postcard for 2021 with my work. So I think because there's so many people, some people are overwhelmed because they have to market, you have to do the work. But Polymath is great. It's so much different challenge every day. It's exciting.
Jean, by the way, I loved your the drawing about the meetup. I really love that. The climbing of the mountain, wonderful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Barry, Linda, Trevor, Claudio, and Maritza. Barry, go ahead.
Well, I'm an INTJ or / ENTJ on a Myers-Briggs on the big five. I'm high on openness and conscientiousness, and I just kind of intuitively come up with a theory that, and this is my main takeaway, that NTs are very high on the polymath, and people that are high in openness and conscientiousness are high on polymathy. So I think there are connections to various personality traits, theories that connect with polymathy. And I think if you did a kind of a comparison between people that are polymaths and the kind of personalities based on these different personality tests, you'd find there would be a pattern. And that's my theory.
Excellent, excellent observation, Barry. Next up is going to be Linda, Trevor, and Claudio next. Linda?
I was very impressed by Terry's discussion of the value of a polymath as a mediator. Angela, when you create this think tank, it could be so important for our government, what the influence polymaths could have on it. I have a question to add to that. Does either one of you see particular leaders in our government who probably are polymaths?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Linda. Next up is going to be Trevor, Claudio, and Maritza. Trevor?
I just wanted to, we were talking about this in our breakout room, and I just wanted to kind of put the bug in other people's ear. We were talking about movies like The Matrix and The Truman Show. The Truman Show is a show where Jim Carrey, from the time he was born, was purchased by a TV network and raised in a reality dome.
Trevor, you'll need to keep it very, very short because we have to do all the takeaways and then we have to respond to all of them. Go ahead.
Okay, anyways, my point is that just like this movie, we too live in a reality dome that is manufactured by government, the media, and other powerful organizations, and no one seems to realize it. So,
thank you. Thank you, Trevor. Next up is Claudio, followed by Maritza. Claudio.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you to Shrikant, Angela, and Terry. It's very interesting. I learned a lot of interesting things, especially the part about the positives and negatives about being a polymath. I think one of the positives are because it's liberating. There's a potential for growth, and you're like a free spirit. And on the negative side, it can be alienated because there's some people who are not polymaths who may reject you or find you maybe somewhat intimidating because they don't know as much as you do in all these fields. So I found that part very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. Last is Maritza. Maritza, go ahead.
Hi. What I got out of today's discussion is the absolute breath of fresh air to hear people say things that have been rattling about in my brain. It's very comforting to know that, you know, there's not really something wrong with me. There exists a lot of people out there who have these questions and these doubts, whereas something that, like, you know, oftentimes there are things that would be perceived as a strength if you're doing it in one aspect. When you start jumping around and doing it in several aspects, people start to question in general whether or not this is a strength of yours or if it's a weakness. And you do it yourself because that's kind of all you see in society. So I really, you know, seeing these accomplished women speaking about this and saying it's okay, this is actually normal, it's just a different flavor of normal, is just awesome for me. So thank you for doing this, and thank you guys for being here.
Wonderful. Maritza, next up, if anybody else wants to share, you're welcome to do that. Gary, go ahead.
An icebreaker that I've used with when I run into somebody I'm curious, like let's say there's somebody repairing an elevator, say, I'm a curiosity junkie. What could I learn about your job that you're able to show me or tell me right now? And that seems to break an easy way instead of saying polymath, just say curiosity junkie. And most people,
yeah,
they're like, oh, okay. And I say, I'd love to hear whatever you have to say and go from there.
Wonderful, Gary. Okay, so let me quickly recap what everybody has said. Mallory asked about starting business as a polymath. Laura said, do we really need labels? Jean talked about the importance of leadership and social skills in order to leverage polymathy, and that it is harder in the beginning and easier towards the later part of your career. Barry connected the polymathy with personality types like the exploratory functions in Jung or openness in Big Five. Linda found the connection that polymaths are mediators very interesting. There was and she talked about whether there is anybody in the government with that that characteristic. Trevor talked about the media dome that we may be in. Claudio talked about the positives and negatives of being polymath. Maritza was relieved to was delighted that this is actually normal. Being polymath is normal and is being regarded as such, which we do here all the time. And Gary has this very interesting take on, kind of calling yourself a curiosity junkie and simply asking people what they do, because you're able to, get them going and get a conversation going in that way. So these are the things that were put on the table. So now, Terry, you're welcome. You got about maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes to respond to anything that you want to respond to. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, well, as far as entrepreneurs, that's the people I generally work with. I usually work with people who are a lawyer and have been in corporate as an IT professional, and they're an architect, and they want to have their own business. And how do they take all of that and weave it together into something cohesive? And that's what I call a prosperous multi-passionista, is someone who has taken all of his or her, not all, everything she's interested in, sort of, and woven it together into a cohesive fabric that is both profitable and impactful. And there's no answer like that right now, but it's possible. So that was the first answer. The second one, I think, Laura, your question is really important. Why label? And here's why. Humans are, we're language driven. We're different from animals because we have this ability to communicate through language. Now, true, monkeys and apes and dogs have their own sort of language, but we think in words, yes, images, but we attach meaning to the images through words. And when I discovered there was such a thing as a Renaissance soul, that I wasn't a weirdo, that I didn't have to live with the label of a jack of all trades or a dilettante. I could have this label of polymath or Renaissance soul. And it's empowering, and it builds strength, and it builds community with others. So that's my short answer to that. I don't even remember some of the other questions. There were a lot of really good ones.
There weren't any other questions apart from, seeing, do you see anybody in government area who is a polymath? That was the only other question.
Angela, I want you to answer that one.
Oh, well, here's a quick one. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was governor of California, a businessman, a bodybuilder, and an actor, he was very successful in all those things, is a good example of someone who was in government.
Oh yeah, and Ronald Reagan, for example, also.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm going to stay out of the current politics.
So folks, so Terry, this was delightful. You're welcome back here anytime. We have basically polymaths coming here every day, and many times during the weekend in order to discuss different aspects of polymaths. So you're always welcome. And Angela, you're getting very good guests. And I think today's interview was really wonderful because Terry got to speak a lot about, and there was no way to stop her anyway. So
I'm sorry.
no.
That's great.
It is delightful. It is delightful. I wish I could have talked even more. So it was just wonderful. You know, because you bring such a zest. You talked about zest and curiosity and love of learning, and you epitomize all of that. So it's just wonderful. It was a great honors, ma'am.
Thank
Well,
you,
that-
Shrikant.
Thank you. And patted on the back.
And I just, a final comment from me, some final thoughts. Terry, first off, thank you for being my guest, and your enthusiasm and commitment to supporting people with this part of their identity is just so refreshing. Like, there aren't a whole lot of us in this field, so I'm so glad that we're in this together. The other final thought I want to say, you know, the topic of this meetup was about the power of polymathy, and hopefully you got some takeaways about why this matters, why it's important, whether at the individual level or at the societal level. But I want to touch on what the question Laura and Jang both touched on, kind of their question as my final thought. Why does the label matter? First off, polymaths are used to not fitting in boxes. So
Yeah.
applying a label feels so foreign to people like this. But if you want to step in fully to this part of your identity, if you want to have awareness of it, leverage it thoughtfully, a label helps. We are a creature who uses language, and being able to claim it and step into it will make it more powerful, in my opinion, as opposed to, I'm not going to have awareness, I'm not going to have a label. No. I'm just going to meander through life and not name it or claim it. So I guess that's my final thought, is if you identify as a polymathic person, if you want to leverage this part of your capacity, then claim it. And if you feel more comfortable saying I'm polymathic or a polymath or a multi-passionista or
A Renaissance soul,
a Renaissance soul, or whatever the word is for you,
generalist,
a generalist, whatever it is. If you want to be a curiosity junkie, like Gary said,
love that.
Go for it. But just having that awareness that this is part of who you are, and that's okay, and it's good, and it's natural, and you're not alone, is how you step into the power of it.
Can I?
The end.
So just a second, Laura. We are wrapping up the meetup. Give me just a second. My take on this is slightly different. I kind of go with Buckminster Fuller or Louis Sullivan or Leonardo, people like that. I simply think that this is being human. This is how children are, and for some reason, society, has regarded this as unusual. So for me, it's like just being human. And so it's the most natural way of being. And I see kind of artificially limiting yourself as being the odd thing. So it's kind of reclaiming your true nature, your true self, as human beings, and not letting the current fads of the society govern, to kind of having to kind of create a category for yourself. So I think this is just being human. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and human's a label that I'm proud of.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Wonderful, folks. So we are, thank you very much.